Well, hello and welcome. I'm Sue Britz,
And I'm Tina Lookbakk. Welcome to Retired.
the podcast where we talk about what life is like when we put on new tread, new wheels that move us to our next adventure. And listeners, let me just say, Tina and I have been having some conversations recently about what's going on in our nation, about the elections, and how that fits in with us and what we think about our podcast. What is this platform that we're using, and why are we talking about the elections or not talking about the elections? What is the impact of that? And we've just gone around and around in circles, haven't we?
Yeah, we've been grappling with what we want to talk about. But I would like to say, Sue, what you just pointed out is to make clear to our listeners, like retired is actually threefolds. It's the retirement, like you said, from our careers. It's the putting on new treads as we move forward. But as you also pointed out, retiring sometimes means taking that piece of you and putting it into the past. And, you know, when we talk about our thoughts on politics and things, we change as people and we also don't. And so some of this is kind of coming up like we're talking about identity, as you were saying. So this is like our identity on this side of things after we have put to rest our career as it once was in teaching, but it's also putting to rest parts of our lives the way we've been and maybe becoming and evolving into something different. So that's kind of what we're grappling with too. It's, how much do we share of this identity of who we are?
All right, so we're going to delve into that subject today. Okay, so Tina, I'm thinking we've got this, we've talked about this. We've got this elephant in the room, the elections, and it invades conversations with everyone at every level. And we see it on TV and in media. We're in our news, of course, and we're down to the last days, and nothing is acting like it has in the past in the elections that we've experienced and seen in our lifetime. And this is different. This is new.
So one of the things we talked about was I always identified much more liberally since I left my home, which was very conservative. And I want to just bring up the story I think I shared with you, but not on air. And when my father was terminally ill and he ended up in the hospital, one of his favorite presidents ever was George W. And I knew that his days were numbered. And believing as I believe politically, this was such an act of love. But while he was in the hospital, I drove over to Barnes and Nobles and picked up the George W. Bush book and came back to the hospital and sat with my mom and dad. And I read that book. It was like our family thing. And it's where I had to put aside what I felt politically, but instead was I read something that really brought my dad comfort, and it was connection with all of us just because we were sitting around reading a book. And I realized that was probably the first time I could put down how I felt deep about my beliefs and put my father's first and held it up. And I'm just sharing that with you now because we were talking about how, as much as we might have identified not with that party, it's harder now than before because I think that the parties are that much more divided. I feel like there's so much more negative energy on both sides. Like it's polarized so much more. Where I think that Democrats could move over to the Republican side a little bit, the Republicans could move over to the Democratic side a little bit. And I'm seeing things happening where it's like each side, like two magnets repelling, it's like both sides are becoming that much more polarized. And then there's the people that have completely shut down, and they're just identifying with nothing, or they're going into the middle approach knowing that it's not going to help and bring either party strength. I don't know if that made any sense, but
Well, it's true, and as you know, as friends, you and I have a lot of similarities, but we also have there's other things that we are not that don't jibe, and I think politics might be one of them. You are trying to find um, live and find a spiritual path that leads towards embracing all of humanity and and of course peace. And you talked about being neutral, whereas I'm passionately standing up for what I see is massive injustice and danger, a lot of danger. I feel the existential threat to democracy, and I feel like this is the time to stand up and to be heard and to say something. And the question is, here we are on this podcast together, and we're trying to figure out how and why to do and say what we're doing.
and one thing that stuck with me from our last off recorded session about this was the idea of hate. And I think that the thing I would love most for our nation is to somehow stop the hating. You know, if I could be running on a platform, I think I would be running on, can we all just like find the things we have in common instead of standing by what we don't have in common and holding on to it so firmly? It would be so wonderful if we could come to this place where we could see our equal humanity, just different terms, and end the hate. And I think that was powerful what you said, because whatever happens, that's the thing I don't want to happen. And I don't want to feel hate, at the end of an election. And I don't want the other side to feel hate at the end of the election. Like, I just don't want hate.
And I hear you, and I do too. And I'm about getting along and peace. I believe strongly in peace, but there's no but. And I will say, I think the difference is we're talking about an individual who is ultimately massively dangerous to democracy and to many people. I feel a lot of hope and belief that assuming Kamala Harris perseveres and becomes our next president, that our nation can settle back into some kind of, at some point, I don't mean like right away, normalcy, the belief that things will go on and be okay. Maybe not exactly how everyone wants it or everyone sees that it should be, but it will be okay. And we can rely on that consistency of what we've experienced throughout our lifetime of the peaceful transfer of power. And our elected officials will serve the population, serve democracy, serve our country. That we can get back to that. I don't mean it's all going to be harmonious in a second, but I think that people really want that. And the alternative is, and when someone tells you who they are, when they say the things that they say, you got to believe them, and especially if they're and repeating them more than once in many different ways. When someone tells you who they are, you need to believe it. And so,
Can you give me an example?
well, when you say I'm going to be dictator only on day one, wow. I mean, that's massive. I mean, that's saying who you are. And when you hear someone, and you can,
Wait, so Sue,
yep.
I haven't read that. I haven't heard that. Um, where was this said? In what
He
context?
so let me I'm gonna have to pause, but I remember seeing
Because
it.
that is a beautiful example, but I would feel more comfortable knowing the source of that.
Okay, so let me go back to what it was. I do remember seeing the clip. It was from one of his interviews or one of his rallies. So let me look that up real quickly here. Um, AP News, December 7th of 2023. Uh, Trump vows to be a dictator on day one, following growing worry over his authoritarian rhetoric, according to the Associated Press. And this was on Saturday, December 2nd, 2023, in Iowa. He was speaking to the caucus, the Iowa caucus, and you can go online and watch him say it. And he's kind of joking, and that's what he later said is, "Oh, it was just a joke," which he does that a lot. But people use humor like that to also tell truths. I mean, we've all done that, I think. You can say something laughingly, but it's based in some truth here, or all truth.
Yeah, I learned that actually going through family therapy. Um,
But let me
and in
tell you another
fact,
one. Just the very act, if you remember Inauguration Day, which was not so long ago, where he was at a rally not too far from the Capitol, and he riled people up. He didn't directly say, "Go now and storm them with weapons and be violent," but he did all the things around it to rile the mob. And the assault on the Capitol went on and on. People were pleading with him to please stop this, call your people off, or call the people off, and he wouldn't do it for the longest time. They were threatening. I mean, not only were they assaulting our sacred ground of our Capitol building, attacking, hurting, and destroying the building itself, but attacking the police, and again, why weren't the police more? Why weren't there more reinforcements? I always said on that day, even had I personally walked into the Capitol on any given day, not during that event, and leaned against a wall, I would be chastised, maybe even removed from the Capitol, because I would be negatively impacting that building, and with good cause, I think. However, on that day, there weren't very many police there to protect our Capitol and our leaders who were inside, our elected leaders who were inside. They threatened Nancy Pelosi with death. They threatened our vice president, Trump's vice president, with hanging him, and he refused to say anything until later. That man
until it was all
enabled
done.
that assault on our Capitol. Yeah. And then, since then, has denied that the elections were legal. And yeah, he says it's all a fraud, and he says that over and over. So, I mean, just those two things. I mean, he's got such a history of so much lying and untruths. I'm not even going to go there right now. Those two things right there, anyone else had any hint of anything like that, they wouldn't be running an election and people voting for him. In our lifetime, there's been nothing like this. And so when someone says, "I will be a dictator," that he is an authoritarian, that he wants to massively deport millions of people, close the border, and they've taken away his Supreme Court has taken away Roe v. Wade, which has been integral to our nation as women to control your own body. It's only been 100 years since we've had the right to vote, and then we had this right to control our body, and that's been taken from us. There's too much that tells me that this is very different. This is truly an existential threat, which, by the way, is an existential threat that is distracting us from, not just in our nation, but worldwide, from the big existential threat, which is climate change. Well, Tina, I'll come back to something that we've talked about, and I think that it's really powerful. You recognize that the stuff that we're talking about, the things that are happening in our nation, triggers us, triggers you. It certainly triggers me, and I think it triggers a lot of people when we see bad behavior. Bad behavior.
I have personally known someone in my life who was very similar in personality to Trump. And when I hear some of the things said, it that's where it has been very triggering because it's bringing me back into places in my life that I've had to do a lot of work in healing through therapy, like lots of it. Um, and so, listeners, when I get quiet, it's because that's what we talked about. It's the triggering, it's the bringing back my previous experiences that are just so similar. Um, and it's just difficult. And I think that's part of why I don't want to step back into that arena. Because I really feel like I was in a gladiator arena for a good portion of my life, um, fighting to stay alive. And it sounds extreme, but, emotionally alive. And I'm seeing so many patterns that are just similar. And so that's why I'm quiet.
Well, when you that powerlessness gets triggered,
Yeah.
there are lots of ways to manage that, and some of them, you're talking about personally being triggered, and I think that a lot of us feel that way, but I also think our nation has been triggered, and I think that feeling of powerlessness is only cured by action, by speaking out, by speaking up, by saying the things that need to be said, by taking action, and whatever that looks like for you politically or personally. Um, that's why I feel so passionate about talking about this thing that is happening in our nation to us that is redefining who we are and redefining what politics looks like.
And I've also learned sometimes with certain personalities that when you do speak up, it can have such negative consequences if that person is in a position of power
Mm.
financially, um, societal status. There's a lot of power some people wield. And I agree with you in standing up. I can say whatever I feel about our candidates and one in particular, and it won't affect me because I'm just one of millions. But I've also learned that in a smaller environment with someone close, that power dynamic can truly destroy another person. And sometimes the safest thing to do is to remain silent. So, again, this speaking up, you're right. Maybe it's safer in a political situation, but I had to learn from a personal situation that at times to stay silent is the best thing to do. So I'm grappling with that as well.
Yeah, and I come back to the thought of when you see someone who now has been, which we all know, we can put all kinds of terms on Trump. So you could throw around terms like narcissistic and so forth, but they've also, people are speaking up, and fascist is the word that is now. It's been said, but it's now there's a lot more direct evidence to that. And when we're talking about fascism and this coming up through our political system in a quote legal way, like Hitler did, I always, as a kid, thought, would I speak up? Would I have the courage? And I always thought, of course I would. And then, as when I became a mother, I'm like, wow. I mean, at some point, you want to protect your own, not maybe not yourself even, but your child. And then I think about, if that were to ever happen in our nation, would we have the courage to speak up and look around and know that it's happening? Because that's the thing that, it surprised people that the shift happened so quickly. I say yes. And right now I don't have my child is an adult woman. So um, I have the freedom to speak up and to say that and to call out and to take action, whether again, whatever political action you're taking. Um, but this is the time, when there's a threat of fascism, there's a threat of authoritarianism, when there's a threat of against our democracy, and you see it happening. And there's been these examples throughout history, which we love so much. This is the moment to speak up because if he were to win, we don't know what rights will be taken away, how democracy will survive, and that's too much to worry about, to be concerned about.
So I have a question just to play devil's advocate. Why are we assuming that our government, with all the checks and balances it has in place, why are we assuming that it's going to fail us now with this particular candidate?
Is that a legitimate question?
Yeah.
Well, you know, he tried during his presidency to use presidential decrees to do all kinds of things, and his staff slowed him down and pushed him this way and that way and kind of managed him. He has seated Supreme Court justices that have taken away Roe v. Wade, which is essential to women's one essential part of women's rights to be fully human in our nation. Um, our Congress, if the majority is Republican, he's got all the cards. He's got everything he needs. He's got everything he needs to do that. And once you've got all those at hand, and he's had these 4 years to pull together a team that will do his bidding. That's all you need. That's all you need. The Project 2025. Oh, I hear Gigi. She's not liking what I'm saying. I have not read all of Project 2025. I don't know that I'd want to, but that there apparently this is the American conservative think tank that has put together a plan um, that based on what Trump had been saying during his presidency and since Trump now disavows it, but it here's this plan and it's out in the open and it is a dismantling of our rights of democracy. Is that an answer?
Yeah, I think you did a great job. Even before you got to the Project 21.
2025. It's astounding. It's scary. Did you ever read Margaret Atwood's Handmaiden Tale?
No, I just watched it and it was so disturbing that I stopped it 2 times, and it was my daughter, my youngest daughter, that's like, "Come on, sit with me. Let's do this." And, uh,
That's what's
yeah,
happening
again.
right now. I mean, that's the threat of what is happening right now. And I have to say, I'm very happy that I have the alternative to go to Canada as a Canadian citizen, as a dual citizen. I have dual citizenship, and I'm very happy that that's an alternative. Yeah, and realistically so.
So, one of the things, if we're talking about retired, that, I read about this morning that affects me personally. So, all these years that I had been working, I was either under my husband's insurance through the school, or I was working and had insurance through the school as a teacher. Excellent, by the way, insurance. So I'm now one of the people that is under the California Covered Plan based on how much income and then how much it will subsidize. And that's an important issue for me. And I love NPR because supposedly it's neutral. It has felt neutral to me. Um, and it talked about, here's the article. It says, here's where Harris and Trump stand on three big healthcare issues. And we have the Medicare drug price negotiations where it sounds as if, as we know, Biden and Harris have wanted to cap the amount that you could charge for people with a diabetes, let's say, and one of the main medications, it's pricey.
With people
And
with pre-existing conditions, you mean?
yeah,
Okay.
and basically where, gosh, this is hard to recap. Hold on. It says giving Medicare the power to directly negotiate the prices of some of the most expensive prescription drugs. And then they differ in that because Trump has not said if he supports repealing the law or whether he would continue to defend it in court. So there's really no clear. I guess what I want to say in this article is that Kamala is so clear on her stances. Whether people agree with it or not, the comfort I have is knowing where she's going and where she's not budging. And I think what's uncomfortable for me, which is also a trigger of my past, is the unpredictability where nothing is clear cut. So I haven't, and this article is supporting this, is I don't think that Trump has been clear enough on his stances when it comes to healthcare. I don't know that he knows how clear he needs to be because I don't think he's so clear.
I don't think he cares about our healthcare.
Well, he shouldn't have to worry about our healthcare because his is fine. He's got it taken care of. But I don't. And the point I'm making is one of the things that I don't know is he going to continue? And he wasn't clear on his debate, is what his plans are to continue going forward or what changes he'll make. Like he, it was so unclear in that debate. And for me, it's saying right now, lawmakers capped the assistance to individuals who made up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which today is about $125,000 for a family of four. And if we cut that cap, and it basically said that consumers' portion of their premiums have been nearly cut in half. But if this all changes, oh, what does it say? Hold on. It was a little scary because it's going to affect me and so many of us that don't have insurance. Hold on.
That's one more way to control people by making them worry about their
It's
health
true.
care
It's
and
a very
everything.
scary thing.
And it's one way to distract them from what from other issues and other things that they need to fight for. Then we're ending up having to fight for basic rights.
Okay, because the subsidy had increased to a higher cap, it said that the people that signed up for this coverage had nearly doubled to more than 21 million people. So that tells me there's a lot of us out there who need that health care and need that support.
Yeah, he wants to repeal, uh, quote, the disaster known as Obamacare.
And it's Obamacare that's saving me right now.
Right. And by the way, you said that you had great health care under our school district's plan. I'm thinking, oh my word. I remember finally I was paying, and this is what, 10 years ago? I was paying $726 per month to cover myself and my daughter. That was almost a fourth of what that was a fourth of what I was earning just on that.
Okay, so here we go. These enhanced subsidies, as they are called, are set to expire at the end of 2025. If that happens, it is estimated that monthly premiums for people with subsidized ACA plans would double in many states. And right now, Sue, I I don't know what I would do. It would be like my entire income as I'm starting this business is going to go to insurance. And that's a frightening thing. And and his stance is really not much of anything. So we don't know where he stands on this. So again, it's a wild card, and that's a big thing. And I think that people that don't have to worry about health insurance don't really understand what that means. And if you're on my end of things, it's everything, because if I were to have an accident, it's not even, I'm a healthy human, I don't even have a prescription. But if I get into one accident, whether it's breaking my leg, that could be the tipping point. And you hear these stories where people get sued for their homes. I own my home outright. Lucky for me, but that's the only thing I have at this point. So it's a very frightening prospect to think that health insurance could be just completely taken out. And I think that that's a problem, I think, in most situations where if you don't live that experience, you just don't know what that means. And I think that that's a problem with most people in upper levels of economy have no concept or awareness what that means unless they came from that. Yeah.
You know, a lot of what he says um, he will do is not super specific.
It's not. That's what I'm
And
saying.
and
So
so
you
when you
don't know
say
what you're voting
right,
for.
so when you say I'm gonna and the rhetoric, the words that he uses to define something is so volatile. Seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. Okay? I think
You're right. They're
I th-
not right.
I
Those are
think
extreme words.
that people want to have legal, a safe border and a legal ways to come to our country, whether they're visiting or whether they're migrating. Then, another one, end inflation and make America affordable again. Like, but how do you do that? So yeah, I think everyone could agree with that. We'd love inflation to go away and make
But
afford
where's the plan?
right.
And
He
that's the
did say he
thing.
wants to
There's no plan. And I feel like with Kamala, she's outlined this is what we've done, this is what we can do, this is what the steps would take. Like, I feel like she's very organized. She's like a teacher with a good lesson plan. Like, she knows what the goal is, and she has the steps in place to get there. And when I've been listening, I don't feel that Trump has clarified for me in certain areas specifically what the plans are. It's kind of like, it'll take care of itself. It's just all going to work out. And as you know, in a classroom full of kids, if you don't have a clear plan and a clear backup plan and a clear backup plan for the backup plan, it's chaos. And so maybe that's how I'm looking at it. Without a clear plan, it's like chaos in a classroom.
right. So he gives all these big, ideas, overarching ideas, and then and the specifics come into that 2025, the plan 2025, which he says he disavows, and yet, this is done by his think tank people. So, you have to take these in kind of in tandem. But when you say I'm gonna, do take away the no tips on taxes. Okay, so that's something that's somewhat specific, but I don't know how that you'd go about doing that. But it, that's something that get a certain group of people very excited. That he
Yes.
wants to
And I can see that.
yeah, and he wants to restore peace in Europe, in the Middle East. Okay, and the rhetoric that he uses, it it is again very volatile and divisive.
Well,
But
okay, wait a
but
minute.
then
So what are the steps to creating peace with what are those steps? And how is that volatile?
no, I'm saying the language, the rhetoric he uses that he can go in on day one and stop the war against Ukraine. Um,
What?
he said this, and this is what he has restated numerous times that he will do that. He'll negotiate the end to that in one day, and we know what that negotiation means. I mean, it's all very pro Russian, and oh, just give up this part of the land, and then it'll be all done. Like he would have the power or authority to even make that happen. But here, I was trying to go to this point. So when we go back to the idea of immigration, he has said and reiterated numerous times that he wants to carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. He wants to round people up and put them in camps. So all this the idea, the image of that, it brings back. I mean, he's saying who he is. You get and I remember during the debate and his interviews, people ask, how is this going to happen? Are you going to come to people's doors and storm in and take people away? What does this look like? And he always deflects. He is very good at deflecting and reiterating things with more volatile language. But those images bring up exactly the fascism, the authoritarianism, the greatest message that our generation is supposed to have learned from World War II. You know, wow. So you have some messages that people can get behind, but the actions, the the rhetoric, the threats, and the hatred, the vitriol that he uses is so um, dangerous, just dangerous.
And I think that's what really just stuck in my mind. It's the same. And I don't think people can maybe people like our parents' age will then take a moment. I think that was a powerful thing. It's the same thing. That's what Hitler did.
It is, and the echoes are
And
all right
now we're
there.
saying it is the exact same thing.
Well, and it's not like he doesn't know about these things. He's learning from history and implementing uh, similar tactics. And, this is the thing. We talk about he has an idea and then he might go to the next step. So his idea, like, okay, the wall to just shut off, and that's another,
The Berlin
historic,
Wall.
right. It's a way to shut things off. And so he's drawing from history, but, the reality is then the fact that he went to the next step and said, I'm going to have these camps. Wow. I mean, there's some planning
Wow.
there
I know.
rather than just his generalities that he uses on so many things. So, to me, he's telling us who he
Oh,
is,
he's exactly
and
telling
he's
us
telling us what he will
exactly what he
do.
wants to do.
And that's a real fear. I mean, that's a real. We're in this Trump era where our culture has changed. It shows up in so many different ways. Just the freedom to be uh, an asshole, to be cruel and hateful, and that's okay. That's the quote norm now, rather than just being decent
And
and
let's talk about groping women.
mm. Well, that's so many. That's
I mean, that
decades
was back
ago.
then.
Yes, that's a long
And
time
he thought
ago.
it was funny.
He's redefined our culture, and I mean, just an example. We were at the gas station, and we were in line. We pull up behind this guy who just pulled up, already started pumping, but had been there for I don't know, 30 seconds. So he's got a head start on us. We pull up, put in the pump, and the guy behind us in a big truck says, "Can't you just wait? Can't you?" And starts yelling at Mel.
For
And
what?
he wanted us to wait, and then for that other person to finish, and we pull forward to the next
Oh, God, because he didn't wanna go around and back up to get to the other
or
pump?
just wait. And
No.
so Mel got back in the car. The car Mel was pumping, she was done, and the car in front of us was just leaving. So it was like concurrent.
Oh
And
my
the guy
god.
is already starting to pull up behind next to us, getting as close as he could to our car,
Wow.
staring us down.
And he could have
And
gone in front
and he
and taken the pump.
hang on, he pulled in front and he pulled sideways into the so he was blocking the
Oh,
middle aisle, where people could get through. And he sauntered out, slowly filled his gas tank, stared us down, turned his back on us,
so
taken
hateful.
so much time as he wanted, and then left. He had to teach us a lesson,
Right.
and we
Wow.
what do you do? You've got to have the self-discipline to sit there and not escalate because and he was a big guy. Um and he was aggressive in his talking and everything. He could easily hurt us. He could
Of
hurt
course.
your car and all. Is this worth it? And so then we were going into Costco and he was going into Costco and I thought, I do hope that he crosses paths, that I would just say to him, Sir, thank you so much for teaching us that important lesson. Have a blessed day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I wanted to say
Yeah.
because it was sarcastic and ironic and yet true. You taught us
Yes.
one more time, we have to take the shit of hateful,
Bully.
misogynistic, bullying behavior, and he gets to walk through the world doing that as much as he wants to whomever he wants. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you form society like that, you know, when that behavior becomes totally acceptable and normal and everyday and commonplace and puts you in your place.
Damn, this
If
is a
you're not
good
an
speech.
alpha male, that is what we've got to speak up and work against. That's what and
That was excellent, Sush.
I took a video of the dude in case he did start doing something wrong. And Mel's like, no,
Good.
don't let him see you doing that.
No,
And
good.
and I wasn't letting him see me, but
That was smart.
you know,
That was the wild card crazy.
and it happens over and over. I mean, you see this.
Yeah.
We're on the highway; people are flicking the birds. We didn't used to do this stuff with such intensity and such
No.
regularity that you're going through a day and you have multiple interactions like this. It shouldn't be this way. It didn't used to be this way because it's now changed society into we can treat each other like, yeah, put people in their place. And then I have to sit there and think, "Oh my God." And I'm just an old white lady, What about all the people of color? You know, every day they go
Right.
through this every
Right.
day all the time, regardless of
Right.
Trump era or not.
You're right.
Moments where you fear for your safety and you have to have the discipline to not react inappropriately. And if you do say something, you have to say it in a way that keeps you safe. Keeps you safe. Damn, that's not the country I believe in. And I am a patriotic person. That's the accusation against people like me is that you're not being patriotic. Oh my word, I'm one of the most patriotic people there are. I love having my flag up. I love teaching
Sure,
US
I have a flag
history.
out too.
Love teaching US history. Love our country, participate in democracy. I That's so important. I love our country. And this aspect of it, I don't.
And I too have my flag outside because I do love this country and there's so much good about it. I agree.
We both agree. We love our country. It's a great democracy. Keep working towards an ever more perfect union. Make sure you vote. That wraps up this episode of Retired. Thanks for listening.
Until next week, please feel free to lend your feedback or ask questions by emailing us at retiredpodcastnewtred@gmail.com. You're invited to follow us on Facebook at Retired Podcast New Tread. Check the show notes for links and contact information.
Retired is co-hosted by Sue Britz and Tina Lokkbakk. It is produced, directed, and edited by me, Sue Britz. Music and graphics are by me too. Please click to subscribe so that you won't miss your chance to join
Join our retired road trip.